Assalamu alaikum, namaste, Sawubona, Muriapo. Hello, my colleagues and friends. I was invited today to share my journey in the field of sports psychology as someone with a culturally diverse identity who could speak to various experiences within cultural sports psychology as a transnational, intersectional, feminist sports psychologist. My presentation is titled A Wandering Nomad, given my residence on 3 continents, across 5 nations, and always happy to consider new homes across the globe. In our work, we know cognitive diversity refers to including individuals with unique and diverse viewpoints to solve problems in the workplace. These viewpoints are informed by the different experiences, cultural backgrounds, and gender identities that employees bring to an environment, and hence can enhance performance. Through diversity, we can achieve inclusion if we are prepared to see people and hear people like me and not see them as a threat. My title page leaves you with a rhetorical question on fit, and I hope through my presentation this becomes clear. In order to share my experiences in this field, it is important that we understand how I identify. I began today by greeting you in 5 different ways, which speaks to some of the more salient characteristics of my identity. Firstly, with an Arabic Islamic greeting, next an Indian greeting derived from Hinduism and used amongst the Indian community worldwide, in 2 African languages native to Zimbabwe, where I was raised, and in English, which is universally spoken. For those who don't know me, my name is Shameema Yousuf, sports psychologist, certified mental performance consultant, and mental health counselor, which is an important part of my identity, having retrained at Boston University in the USA at the turn of 40 after a 16-year financial career. What you will notice on this slide are my parents at my side at my graduation, always in support of my choices and journey in life, and a big part of who I am today. Also, on this slide, you will note at the bottom left a picture of me wrapped with a headscarf stood outside the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, just moments before entering for prayers. To the right side, you'll see me wearing a sari, which speaks to my Indian ethnicity, and while I don't often wear them, on big occasions like weddings, I have done. It is also important to recognize that my cultural experiences as an Indian ethnic of British African nationality and culture is very different to those born and raised in India. On this slide, you will note that the athletic identity is important to me. This is because I've represented an underdeveloped country during a time when sport was dominated by the white population. I am also really very aware of the privilege I had attending a school in Zimbabwe that offered some of the best facilities and a strong education in the region, although in certain sports circles, I was often the only person of color as depicted by that photo of me and my tennis team. This privilege, though, reminds me that many did not have this kind of access to facilities, given differences in socioeconomic status. Lastly, I am Zimbabwean born and raised between Zambia and Zimbabwe with close ties to South Africa, where I later resided and worked post-apartheid in 1994 as a financier. Africa is very much in my blood, and I maintain strong ties to this region. However, I will share that I consider myself a world citizen. Within a few days of being born in Zimbabwe, a country with segregated apartheid regime, I was on the road to Zambia, and within a couple of years of life was in the sky traveling the world with my parents. To me, this is significant because it has exposed me to different cultures and people, and I've gained knowledge about the history of other nations. I was born in a hospital where care for people of color was sectioned off, my identity being primed very early in life around barriers and privileges as a person of color. As mentioned, my early years of life were in Zambia, and it's here that I felt a part of an integrated, inclusive community, although I'm now more aware that my experience was from a privileged lens in terms of this wouldn't have been the experience for many indigenous Black Zambians, nor the experiences of those who might have identified as LGBTQ+. We were the only Muslim family in a small mining and agricultural town called Kabwe, whose population included European expatriates, a significant Hindu community, and a local African community. I attended a convent school where I had Bible studies, and in solidarity with the nuns attended Christmas services. Bible studies continued beyond these early school years, and my parents also sent me to a Gujarati after-school class to try and learn the Gujarati language. I wasn't great at that, by the way. I attended Hindu religious events in solidarity with friends, and as my childhood progressed and we moved back to Zimbabwe, I also attended after-school Islamic classes, where I learnt the Quran in Arabic and the teachings of Islam in English. It is later 18 that I moved to the UK, a British Commonwealth citizen, where I have continued to build on my identity and experiences in life. And I share with you my personal journey and identity because, as you can see, it is complex and it is intertwined. My identity and experiences can be explained through two frameworks in cultural sports psychology. Although originally coined in 1989 to discuss the experiences of Black women, intersectionality is an analytical tool that views categories of race, class, gender, sexuality, nation, ability, ethnicity, age, and others as interrelated and mutually shaping one another. It is a contextual framework for analyzing how intersecting power relations intertwine and influence social relations across diverse societies, as well as individual experiences and opportunities in everyday life. It's also a framework for examining systems of oppression. With transnationalism, there are two key significant aspects to consider: the physical act of crossing international borders and the cultural transitions one experiences. Transnationalism refers to people who move to a new country but keep strong economic, social, and political connections with their countries of origin. With their model of cultural transitions, Rieber et al. Considers three phases of the transitional process, which involves social repositioning, negotiation of cultural practices, and meaning reconstruction to move towards successful adaptations. Some cultural reflexivity is required, but I'd like to also point out that it should be noted that the research around transnationalism speaks to the experiences of white identifying individuals. Still, as we will see through these frameworks, there are challenges that I have faced given my intersectional identity as a transnational, and I am constantly culturally reflecting and adapting. To consider some of my challenges in the field, we can begin with my journey across to the USA through the lens of neuroracism, where my identity was primed as an international alien student on séjour. This is a temporary stay where one has few rights. Alien is how the US government referred to internationals. I was refused a US student visa twice, despite coming and going through the USA annually in my previous career. There was a clear lack of understanding on how a Zimbabwean-born, single, mature woman whose parents lived abroad was capable of living in the UK as a British citizen and was now wanting to switch up a career. Still, on my third attempt, I guess you could say I got lucky. While in the US, I did face microaggressive behaviors around language skills, which can be explained as neuroracism, as though an Asian woman from a British Zimbabwean background is incapable of writing English. However, it was important for me to try and adapt, so I retrained in American English. Neuroracism has been discussed in literature to highlight the experiences of international student athletes, and Angel Brutus and I co-chaptered on supporting athletes of intersectional racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, and international status a couple of years back, and the reference is highlighted at the bottom of the slide. On return to the UK, I had challenges of gaining employment. The big difference I began to see between sport and finance was that in sport, those employed were largely homogenous in race, whereas the London financial industry is rather international, and so there is more diversity in terms of race and ethnicity. I had faced an intersection of sexism, racism, and Islamophobia in sport environments, where often white young males and females with no practical experience were able to gain employment ahead of me for roles in well-being, psychology, lifestyle care, and developmental roles, even if they had no background in psychology. Yet here I was with a sport and clinical training with supervised hours equivalent to stage 2 and more, but was being overlooked. Additionally, I was not helped by associations like the BPS, who wouldn't acknowledge the 3-year equivalent master's training that I gained through BU, which incorporated an extensive list of modules, clinical and performance psychology practicums, and applied internships. And I found this to be rather uninclusive, given this extensive training that was a little bit more than the master's training here in the UK. In the end, by going directly to the HCPC with my ASP CMPC certification and my transnational experiences, I gained entrance onto the register. Over the past 7 years, maybe 7.5 years, I had applied for 500 jobs, had maybe 12 interviews, and converted 1. Often I don't get feedback. When I do, it's never consistent, sometimes even contradictory to what others have said. The one job I did convert, I believe, was due to a black woman involved late in the hiring process who was really wanting a fair and transparent process. Incidentally, last year there was research conducted that pointed towards individuals from racial and ethnic backgrounds having to submit on average 60% more applications in order to get through to a first interview. For those with Arabic names or backgrounds, that percentage is much higher, as it is for those who are black employees. I will also point out that I don't suggest that I should get all the jobs I interview for. I know I didn't perform well on a couple, or wasn't quite ready for the level, perhaps. But ask yourselves this: do white men ever have that problem of ticking all the boxes? In several jobs, it was always the dominant culture hired. The feedback I sometimes get: you were great, but we've decided to go with the other candidate. Or, you're too experienced. I guess those who did interview me can really tick their box to say they've interviewed someone of racial and ethnic background. These experiences were precisely why I've continued to immerse in private practice, and I do more cultural work, which has also really meant relearning theories, for we must recognize that everything that has been taught has been largely through a white Western-centric lens. I have been misunderstood in my cultural approaches, and in the workspaces and various sport domains, I have faced several microaggressions. On these slides, you'll note references to 2 letters shared with the BPS this year, which have highlighted some of those personal examples of microaggressions faced. The impact has been significant in this sports psychology career phase, where I have always valued diversity given my worldview and global and intersectional perspective. The lack of inclusive practices in sport has impacted my mental health, despite quite a healthy approach to self-care. Early transitional difficulties back in the UK were exhausting while trying to find some work and establish myself at the time. I believe I was facing employers who didn't see me for my experiences, but wanted CVs and individuals that really fit their box. The various intersectional power systems that I was marginalized by in sport domains came to a head for me last year, impacting my emotional health. I have not felt more excluded than this past few years. Furthermore, there has been some element of imposter syndrome, and a clear example of this was when a publisher reached out to me to consider publishing a book, and my response was, why me? For one begins to question and doubt oneself. I now, however, say, why not me? Over the years, there has been financial strain without being able to climb the ladder in a similar way as those of the dominant culture. And the systems that marginalize also allow employers to default to statements such as, the other candidate has worked in a national organization and supervised large groups of individuals. What this does is discount my experience in private practice, where I have been required to juggle numerous pieces and develop skills, including supervising a couple of individuals. This, my colleagues, is how white privilege works in favor of many of you. Still, there are several benefits to my moves and my identity and background. I maintain strong links to Africa, which has allowed me to give back to that society in community work, and in sport, we're working with Olympic bodies, the schools, and individuals. My intersectional transnational identity is complex, but allows me to be more adaptable to certain cultural environments, navigating spaces where one aspect of my identity may be more apparent than other aspects of my identity. I have gained multiple connections across the globe through my performance and cultural work, which really speaks to my identity as a universal citizen. In addition, I have developed strong connections with associations across international borders, and I am continuously diversifying my skill set in case an opportunity arises and I decide to wander on again. New opportunities in private practice have sprung up this year in several countries across the globe, and I engage in constant cultural reflexivity, which really helps me to recognize some of my blind spots and consider other cultural perspectives. But at the same time, it helps me to navigate spaces that others struggle with. Given certain marginalized experiences, I have really taken a lead in making change happen, and I believe I've also developed resilience with a survivor mentality. So how have I coped and navigated this past decade in the field especially? I'm like a chameleon. On the left, I'm colourful, energetic, passionate, bright, complex, a feeler, and yet often misunderstood. On the right, I go through crypsis to conceal because I need to self-protect in environments that aren't safe. However, in a broader sense, to maintain well-being, I exercise and I play sport, although it is important to recognize I face everyday racism in all circles of society. I lean on my family and friends for love and support. I seek advice from trusted colleagues and connections. I read and self-educate continuously, and this stems from my father, who has always said to me that education is a route to success. I take regular home visits to Zimbabwe, although this has been very difficult this year. I eat healthy. I practice mindfulness, acceptance, compassion, and gratitude. I do a lot of community work. And most importantly, I engage with my strength of courage to speak up, especially more recently, while similarly committing to advocacy. And how does my journey continue? To quote Kamala Harris, who shares a Zambian childhood history, I will dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see myself in a way others may not, because they just haven't seen it before. I will continue to wander the globe where opportunities bring more connections. I don't fit neatly into the boxes created by homogeneous thinkers, and neither do I really wish to. However, inclusion is different, and I do wish to have a seat at the table where my voice is heard and is celebrated for my difference, because this helps those at the table grow as much as their perspectives help me to grow. My message is this: to students and trainees, be better than the previous generations, seek cultural knowledge, and build an inclusive community because you are our future of the field. To marginalized colleagues that don't have a voice, let those advocating know your story, or find allies so that they can advocate on your behalf and support you. You really are not alone. And to the field as a whole, let's go forward embracing difference and complexity. We all have a culture and we all have experiences. Examine your cultural biases and privileges and look to expand on your understanding of marginalized populations and their experiences. In our field, if we do not embrace all those who feel they do not belong and who are excluded, we will always be under threat as a field. We have to go out there and demonstrate to the world that we are inclusive. If this is our field of psychology, if we want organizations to employ us, this is our role, that we actually model what we are looking for in those cultural environments. This combative and territorial approach must be dismantled in favor of collaboration and inclusivity. My gratitude to the BPS Conference Committee for inviting me to share my story. My details are on the next slide, and I will end with the words of our Zambian president, Tiende Pamudzi Indimiti Maumo, which is, let's walk together with one heart. Thank you.